Former President Trump now organizing key allies in an effort to counter this week's big reveal by the January 6th committee. A series of committee hearings begins in primetime Thursday night, and those involved promise new evidence, new testimony, and new context of how Trump's plot to steal the 2020 election unfolded, including the violence at the Capitol.
Trump was, as we know, president for 4 years, and he learned some things about the levers of power. If he becomes president again, I think there's going to be not as much ambiguity. I think he will clearly do some things that are frightening.
As we head into the January 6th hearings later this week, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame have called Donald Trump America's first seditious president. I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and just to refresh your collective memory, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were the investigative journalists who were best known for breaking the Watergate scandal back in the days of Nixon. If anybody knows about presidential scandals, it's probably these guys. Now, we're all familiar with the big lie, and we're all anxiously awaiting the revelations that the January 6th committee has promised to deliver. We've already started seeing insurrectionists get arrested and charged for their sedition, but one interesting thing that's come from those arrests is the confessions.
I would say the Denny Rodriguez case is especially interesting. This is a California man. He's the individual who drove a stun gun into the neck of Mike Fanone, the former DC police officer, on January 6th. And what was sort of remarkable about that is through the legal process now, we've heard this 3-hour-long interview that the FBI conducted with Denny Rodriguez that he basically talks about what was his inspiration behind this. It's rare that you sort of get this criminal basically confessing to what he did and exactly what motivated him. And he just talks about how he thought that the election was stolen. He thought that he was going to be the good guy, that they were going to take over the Capitol that day. And that's a theme in a lot of these criminal cases. You have this evidence, a ton of evidence of these individuals expressing exactly why they did what they did, and saying that, they honestly believe that the election was stolen. And it sort of illustrates why these vicious lies about the 2020 election were so inherently such an inherent threat, because if people actually believed the election was stolen, this was sort of an inevitable consequence of that. This was a natural reaction in a lot of ways to these lies about the election.
Now, beyond those guys, the architects of the insurrection are starting to fold. Peter Navarro, who explained the entire insurrection plot on MSNBC's show The Beat with Ari Melber, was recently charged with 2 counts of contempt for defying the committee subpoena. He keeps invoking an executive privilege that he does not have, and he says that his reasons for refusing to cooperate with the committee is that he doesn't consider the committee to be legitimate. But, as most of us know, you don't have to believe in something for it to be real, and in this particular case, the Supreme Court has backed the committee and affirmed its legitimacy.
So, Navarro then appears to fall back on the vague assertion that the executive privilege here belongs to former President Trump, which is not only dubious, but entirely irrelevant, because our committee has not been given any attempted invocation of executive privilege by Donald Trump.
Can you answer once and for all why you should have privilege if Trump won't say it?
Raskin, can talk all he wants. The president is not going to cooperate with a kangaroo committee run by people like Raskin and Adam Schiff.
Now, in this piece written by Bernstein and Woodward, they make several comparisons between Nixon and Trump. They both believed in a larger purpose for themselves, and both men believed in achieving their goals at any cost. It's all very Machiavellian in the worst sense of the word. However, the differences between the two men are, I think, greater causes for concern. Nixon resigned following the Watergate scandal even after he'd been sworn in for his second term as president. Trump would never have resigned from his presidency, which we saw time and time again during his 4 years in office. He just kept denying accusations and evidence put forth against him. He kept gaslighting the public, and he kept distracting the media with nonsense so that they wouldn't notice everything else that was going on. People are still debating over the legitimacy of Covfefe, for example. But the scariest part of all of this is that Nixon resigned from office because he didn't want to be removed from office. The system worked well enough back then that when confronted with evidence, enough members of Congress, including members of Nixon's own party, were willing to do the right thing, guided by both legality and constitutionality.
Let me add one really important thing without a strident tone, and that is about the huge difference between Watergate and what is happening today. And that is that it was courageous Republicans who said about Richard Nixon, you cannot be the president of the United States anymore because you are a criminal and you have violated the law. So when we wrote, Bob and I, the final days about Nixon's last months and year in office, among other things, we went to see Barry Goldwater, the great conservatives, the nominee of his party in 1964, to ask what had happened that he saw at the end. And he pulled out his diary, poured himself a big whiskey, pulled out his diary and began reading, and told us how he and the Republican leadership of the House and Senate had marched to the White House, confronted Richard Nixon across the desk. And Nixon said, Barry, in terms of conviction or acquittal in the Senate for after impeachment, would I prevail or not? Goldwater looked at the president and said, no, Mr. President, you have only a few votes and you will not have mine. You will not be acquitted. You will be convicted.
Today, that's simply not the case. With the GOP stacking governing bodies across the nation with loyalists, it doesn't matter if the country believes their lies or not. It doesn't matter if the evidence refutes the claims, and it doesn't matter how many videos like this I make. The polarization we're currently experiencing in Congress is hurting all of us, and now it's literally threatening our democracy. Now, to that end, Fox News still hasn't confirmed whether or not they'll be airing coverage of this hearing, so its viewers will remain uninformed of what's really going on, resulting in even further division amongst Americans.